The empath never understood why certain people smiled in their face while quietly resenting everything about their presence, until they realized their light was exposing wounds other people were trying desperately to hide. This is one of the most painful truths genuine empaths eventually discover. Not everyone is comforted by light. Some people are confronted by it. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the empath rarely walks into a room trying to intimidate anyone. They are not usually the loudest person, not always the most confident, not even the most successful. Yet somehow, their energy alone unsettles certain people almost instantly. The empath can feel it, the strange tension, the subtle passive aggression, the forced smiles, the strange competition that appeared out of nowhere. Here's what most people don't understand about the empath. Their presence forces emotional truth to rise to the surface. And people carrying hidden insecurity cannot stand being emotionally exposed without permission. The empath has spent years blaming themselves for this. They wondered if they were too sensitive, too emotional, too intense, too different. But the truth sits much deeper than that. The empath carries something rare: authenticity. And authenticity threatens people who built entire identities around masks. This content found the empath for a reason. Because there has been a pattern repeating throughout their entire life. They attract broken people, jealous people, emotionally unavailable people, people who secretly admire them while simultaneously resenting them. And for the longest time, the empath could not understand why. Why did friendships suddenly shift after becoming close? Why did certain people start copying them? Why did kindness get repaid with betrayal? Why did the empath constantly become the emotional dumping ground for people who later turned cold toward them? The answer is painful, but freeing. The empath shines light into places people work very hard to keep hidden, without even trying, without even speaking. The empath's emotional sensitivity acts like a mirror. People feel seen around them, truly seen. And while healed people experience that as safety, wounded people experience it as exposure. That changes everything. Because the empath was never too much. They were simply standing near people who felt uncomfortable being emotionally visible. The empath probably never heard anyone explain it this way, but many people secretly crave the empath's energy, while also resenting the fact that they cannot naturally embody it themselves. That resentment creates strange dynamics. People become obsessed with the empath while criticizing them. People seek their validation while pretending not to care. People envy the empath's softness because deep down, they abandon their own. And the empath feels every bit of it. Every fake compliment, every hidden jab, every strange shift in energy, every moment someone's eyes smile while their spirit hardens. This is so specific to genuine empaths. They notice emotional contradiction immediately. The empath walks into a room and feels tension nobody verbally acknowledges. They hear pain hidden behind laughter. They sense resentment hiding beneath politeness. They recognize envy before a single word gets spoken. And because society conditioned empaths to doubt themselves, they often ignore these instincts at first. They explain away red flags. They overextend compassion. They give people endless chances, until betrayal finally confirms what their spirit knew from the beginning. And this cycle hurts deeply because the empath genuinely wants harmony. They do not enter relationships trying to compete. They are not secretly plotting against others. Most empaths simply want authentic connection. But authenticity is terrifying to people still hiding from themselves. That is why the empath often attracts individuals who feel emotionally fractured inside. The empath radiates warmth, emotional depth, intuition, and healing energy. Wounded people feel drawn toward that light instinctively. It feels comforting, safe, addictive even. But eventually, the wounded person realizes something uncomfortable. The empath's existence highlights everything they abandoned within themselves. Their softness, their intuition, their honesty, their vulnerability, their emotional depth. And instead of healing those wounds, some people choose resentment instead. This is where the empath begins encountering projection. People accuse the empath of being arrogant when the empath simply possesses self-awareness. People accuse them of being dramatic when they express emotional truth. People call them intimidating when they refuse to shrink anymore. People label them different because conformity no longer fits them. What the world calls strange, the universe calls necessary. The empath was never designed to blend into emotionally disconnected environments forever. They were built to awaken emotional truth in others, and awakening always creates friction. This explains why the empath's life has probably felt strangely lonely at times, even while surrounded by people. Because genuine empaths crave soul-level connection, not surface-level interaction. They can feel when conversations lack sincerity. They can feel when someone secretly dislikes them. They can feel when energy shifts. And carrying that level of awareness becomes exhausting. Especially when the empath keeps trying to earn love from people already committed to misunderstanding them. That drains the empath more than anything, trying to prove goodness to people who benefit from misjudging them. And sadly, many empaths become trapped in this cycle for years. They overgive, over-explain, over-forgive, over-sacrifice. They keep believing enough love will finally make others treat them gently. But here's the truth the empath eventually learns. Not everyone deserves access to their energy. And this realization changes their entire life. Because the empath starts recognizing something crucial. Their light was never the problem. The problem was allowing wounded people unrestricted access to something sacred. The empath carries emotional medicine, calmness, compassion, intuition, presence, healing energy. But medicine becomes dangerous in the hands of people unwilling to heal. And this is why boundaries become spiritual protection for the empath. Not punishment, not ego, not cruelty, protection. The empath begins noticing how differently life feels once they stop chasing approval from emotionally unavailable people. Their nervous system relaxes, their intuition sharpens, their confidence returns. Their energy stops leaking everywhere. And suddenly, people who secretly resented them lose access to their emotional supply. That is when resentment often becomes even more obvious. Because some people were never attracted to the empath out of love. They were attracted to access. Access to warmth. Access to validation. Access to emotional safety. Access to healing energy they refuse to cultivate themselves. But the awakened empath no longer exists solely to emotionally rescue others. And this part matters deeply. Because empaths were conditioned to believe love requires self-erasure. They learned to stay available even while depleted, to keep understanding people who never understood them, to keep pouring into relationships that only consumed them. But awakening changes that completely. The empath finally understands that protecting peace is not selfish. It is survival. And something powerful happens when the empath stops dimming their light to keep insecure people comfortable. Their entire energy field changes. They become magnetic. Not because they suddenly become louder or more performative, but because authenticity carries enormous spiritual power. The empath no longer apologizes for sensitivity, no longer hides intuition, no longer shrinks emotional depth, no longer abandons inner truth to maintain shallow relationships. And people feel that transformation immediately. Some become inspired by it. Others become threatened by it. That divide reveals everything. Because healed people celebrate authentic light. Wounded people compete with it. The empath begins noticing how certain individuals only liked them when they were exhausted, insecure, overgiving, and uncertain of themselves. The moment the empath develops boundaries, clarity, or confidence, those same people suddenly pull away, criticize them, or accuse them of changing. But the empath did change. They stopped betraying themselves. And this is the version of the empath that changes their destiny forever. The version that finally trusts inner knowing. the version that walks away from manipulative energy faster, the version that recognizes resentment immediately instead of personalizing it, the version that no longer confuses being needed with being loved. This is where the empath becomes unstoppable, because emotional awareness evolves into discernment. Discernment changes everything. The empath no longer chases everyone, no longer explains themselves endlessly, no longer forces connections that feel spiritually heavy. Instead, they observe. They notice who celebrates their growth, who becomes cold when they succeed, who subtly competes, who only appears during moments of weakness, who drains energy instead of nourishing it. And slowly, the empath circle changes. Smaller, softer, more genuine. Because the awakened empath values peace more than popularity. That lesson arrives after enormous emotional pain, after betrayal, after manipulation, after realizing some people smiled while secretly hoping the empath would fail. But none of that darkness was powerful enough to extinguish the empath's light. In fact, it strengthened it, because every painful experience sharpened intuition further. The empath became wiser, more discerning, more spiritually aware. And eventually they stopped asking, "Why do people resent the empath's light?" They started asking a different question. Why keep shrinking for people committed to remaining blind? That shift changes everything, because the empath finally understands their sensitivity was never weakness. It was perception, a gift, a frequency, a spiritual intelligence many people cannot comprehend. And once the empath embraces that fully, life begins aligning differently. The wrong people fall away naturally. The right people feel peaceful immediately. Conversations become more authentic. Relationships become more reciprocal. Energy becomes cleaner. The empath stops fighting themselves. And that creates a level of inner peace that cannot be faked. Anyone this resonates with, drop a comment below and let it be known. Because genuine empaths have spent far too long feeling isolated in experiences nobody could explain. But this experience is real. The resentment, the projection, the strange jealousy, the emotional tension people carry around authentic light. It is real. And the empath was never imagining it. If this is the empath's truth, claim it. Like and subscribe if this message finally put words to experiences the empath has carried silently for years. Because something important is happening right now. Empaths everywhere are waking up. They are realizing their sensitivity is not a curse. Their intuition is not irrational. Their emotional depth is not weakness. It is power. Quiet power. Sacred power. Transformational power. And the world desperately needs people capable of feeling deeply without becoming cruel. That is the empath's role. Not to save everyone, not to carry everyone's pain, not to remain endlessly available for emotionally wounded people who refuse accountability, but to remain authentic in a world addicted to emotional masks. That authenticity alone heals more people than the empath realizes, even when others resent it. Especially then. Because light exposes what darkness tries to protect. And the empath was never meant to become smaller just because others feared what their presence revealed. The empath was meant to become fully visible. This message was meant to find them at exactly the right moment.